Welcome to another edition of Working with Gen Z. Friends, we've often said that your context drives what's happening at the workplace. And in a time when there is intense pressure to innovate, pressure to deliver results, where organizations are becoming more and more outcome driven, it is becoming imperative for teams, managers, and even individuals to become high performing and do their contribution. And when you think about high performing teams and individuals, you normally say that, okay, you have to kind of give them the feedback to make sure that everything is working, is on track. You also have to have proper recognition performance system. But perhaps what is overlooked by managers is the ability or is the need to set clear goals. And managers often undermine the importance of that because the goal setting process can be so crucial and critical when you think about what needs to be achieved. And in a time when there's so much fluidity happening in the marketplace, what do you do, right? Are there certain metrics that you can look at? Are there certain templates? Are there certain processes that one can follow? And those who actually make it happen despite everything that's there, the hybrid work and remote teams and global teams and competition changing, actually have a secret formula figured out. But let's dive in today to kind of really look at how do we go about looking at setting goals, ambitious goals, and kind of measuring it in a way where it's possible. And to help us with that is just the guest that we need. And I'm very happy to welcome my guest, Ken. Ken, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Nikhil. It's a pleasure to meet you once
Excellent.
again.
Ken, so I know we've been trying to do this, so very happy this has finally happened on a Monday morning. So deeply appreciate. Let's dive in. There's lots and lots on a topic of such a nature. We can spend much more than maybe 30 minutes, 60 minutes. But before I go in, Ken, I'd love to for you to share for our listeners and our viewers just the incredible work that you do, your background, and some of the history that you have. So please go ahead.
All right. I was talking about history. I can always start by saying that I started off by being a waiter. That was my first job that I had. And thereafter that, I started giving tuitions and to kids who were just a couple of years younger than me. So that was way, way back. I got myself into a sales job also as well during the time. So I worked through college while my friends were busy going around and having fun. I was there earning for myself because I came from very meager means. But then got into engineering college, studied out there, worked every vacation there also as well. I came back and I realized that what I studied in engineering is not something I need to do, but I found some really good managers for the organizations that I worked with. I worked with an ITES company and I worked with a telecom company, Orange, which became Hutch, which became Vodafone. I worked with them for 9 years and I climbed the ranks pretty quickly and I got into learning and development and became a trainer. And especially in the field of organization development, where they fast tracked me into doing a whole lot of things. It was not until 2009 that the bug came in me that I need to become my own master and become and do my own thing. And that's when I turned consultant. It's been 15 years as a consultant. But in between that, I also turned investor. And with a little bit of spare change that I had, started doing a little bit of angel investing. Two businesses failed, uh, failed massively, but there was one business that actually succeeded massively, and that went into an IPO. And one of the reasons of success out there was with a new terminology, a new management methodology that I applied in that. And in 2015, it was called OKRs. Today, I'm known as the OKR guy here in Asia and in India, and I help organizations in understanding OKRs and making it happen. So that's what I do, along with a whole lot of work in leadership development and organization development.
Beautiful, Ken. What a great story. What a good background. And I think I'm keen to tap into all your knowledge, both from the corporate innings and certainly the startup that you made successful. And the very topic that we've been wanting to talk is the OKRs. Now, let me just start there. Just kind of quickly defining that for a moment and maybe just to set the level stage, and then we'll dive into all the different aspects of it and also specifically the context of Gen Z. So help us to understand. We hear different terminologies called KPIs, OKRs, and so on. So tell us what it means in its sort of simple terms and how does it differentiate from other sort of metric measuring tools and terminology that's often being used by HR and the business world?
Fabulous. I think, first of all, OKRs is more than an acronym. So let me tell you first what the acronym is and then tell you what's more about it. So the acronym OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results. It was started off way back in the 1980s by Andy Grove, who tried it at Intel, the reason for Intel success. Then John Doerr, who left Intel and then joined Google as an investor, taught Larry and Sergey Brin about OKRs. They started applying it. Google has been successful because of it. And multiple people then left those Silicon Valley companies, started up other Silicon Valley companies like LinkedIn, Spotify, and many other organizations that started applying OKRs. So today, OKRs have been used everywhere from the Microsofts, Amazons, Airbnb, Colgate here in India, the Indian School of Business. I have three manufacturing companies, one in Uttar Pradesh, one in Ahmedabad, and multiple other places, small town places. Airline companies in Kuwait are using it, telecom companies in England, pharma companies in Ireland. So, multiple organizations across the world are now using OKRs because it's more than an acronym. So, OKRs, as I said, stand for Objectives and Key Results. Objectives is the key objective that you want to drive. So, say, for example, I want to drive to be the most profitable business in my category, in my region. That's an objective. And then you have key results. Key results are nothing but measures that tell you whether you're reaching your objective. And this is where it starts differentiating from any other kind of mechanism because it's not just one measure. You can have up to 5 measures, so 3 to 5 measures. So if I want to be the most profitable business, probably it's not just EBITDA or maybe revenues. I can start looking for margin contribution. I can look for cost savings. I can look for multiple measures, not just one measure. And that's where it starts differentiating from KPIs as well. I know this is a very revenue driven example, but let me tell you one thing. Most OKRs actually don't are not about revenues. They're about transformations. They're about changes that you want to bring to your business. They're about moonshot goals. It's like almost Elon Muskish, where you're trying to put a colony up there in Mars. So those are the kind of goals, and then you have measures to achieve them. The key thing about OKRs is that they're stretched, moonshotish. The second is that they're transparent. So that means everybody can see everybody's goals. The third is focus. You can't have more than 5 OKRs. So 3 to 5 OKRs at any level within the organization is a must. So that means less is more. Okay. So hence, OKRs are more than just an acronym. They are a methodology that helps the entire organization create a line of sight towards what's really important. Where existing methodologies like KPIs or even balanced scorecard, which is very, very amazing terminology heavy, but very difficult to take down to everything in an organization. KPIs is just an acronym. SMART are just acronyms. They don't tell you the how, they just tell you what about the goals, but they don't tell you how to communicate, how to set them. And the last thing about OKRs, which I love, which I really, really love, and this is where I sell it to organizations, it makes you agile. That means every 3 months, you are setting and resetting your OKRs. So that means you are not caught in a trap of knowing what's best at the beginning of the year and sticking by it. You know what's best every time by looking at data, by looking at the environment and making decisions. It hence helps an organization become more flexible, more agile.
Yeah. No, excellent. Ken. So I think I mean you've set that stage beautifully. I'd like to double click just to kind of now go deeper into this for we'll talk more on the OKRs itself, but just to pull back a bit, for most of us, for managers, we're leading teams and in a high pressure environment, whether you're a small firm, large firm, right? There is the pressure to deliver. And oftentimes, as I said in the prelude, the whole goal setting process, right, can it's all well meaning, well meant, and it comes trickles down and all of that. And in your experience, let's start with that, just to make the linkages slowly. What today seems to be broken into this whole goal setting process, right? And in terms of how they're set, they're tracked, and even eventually what causes the ulcer at the end of the year or that heartburn in you is that meeting for the performance conversation. So help us to understand what have you seen and in over the last decade and a half where you've been exclusively a lot of work here. what seems to be broken, and if you have any even success stories, like, are there stories where it worked? Because most employees, I'd like to, and I hate to generalize, but probably say that, yeah, I was okay, it could have been better, or there's always that distribution curve that the business or the HR wants, and life becomes miserable. So I'm going to turn it to you. Help us to understand, like, where does it go wrong?
So what's broken is the fact that feedback is given in hindsight. That's the first thing. And that means feedback is reserved for and saved for at the end of the year conversations without giving people an opportunity to improve on the go. Feedback is given as a mechanism to defend a rating and a scoring at the end of a year versus as a tool for improvement. That's what's broken. That's the first thing. And that's where existing performance management systems are to blame. And then the mindset of leaders, managers, human resource people to use a structure like a performance management system to just do this. So that's the first thing that's broken. The second thing that's broken is that goals and outcomes are not owned by people. They are cascaded very rigidly down to everybody within the business. And then people don't feel that commitment. There's compliance, but people don't feel the commitment to add in or contribute or say what else can they do. Or if there is a change in the dynamics, how to maneuver around those dynamics. They are more stuck on what's being told because goals are being told. So that's another thing that's, I would say, it's broken through its rigidity in its systems. I think the last thing that is broken in this entire piece is the fact that uh, people set their goals in their comfort zones and they tend to just incrementally move on through them. So that's what then happens to organizations is they also start moving incrementally or they start plateauing as well because then goals are set in comfort zones as well, and hence there's no real challenge there, and that's where managers find it difficult.
So, would you say, and I mean, just kind of, and jumping forward ahead, I think you make a good point up front. It's pushed down. It's not necessarily felt as if that these are my goals, or the commitment kind of drops away. Um, so let's go on the other end where we look at the performance conversation, and therefore, when you come to that, I mean, what is that? Do you believe that what causes sort of the frustration amongst the young Gen Z, especially, and we'll talk more on that, or even a millennial or a Gen X, when you think about or are there any other things that you think about at the performance in the March conversation that happens for us here in India?
Yeah. So what's really happening out there? Let's look at if we're coming down to the topic of Gen Zs or any young people, one of the things that I've noticed, I mean, I got an 11-year-old daughter. I got two interns who are in their mid-20s in my team, and I work with and I train with. Just yesterday, no, so just day before, I was working with a bunch of 20-year-olds who work for a beer company. And one of the things I have found, and it doesn't matter where you come from, whether you come from a tier 3 city or whether you come from a tier 1 urban city, it doesn't really matter. What we've started to seeing happening more and more with the younger generation is they're more curious. They have more information at their disposal, right? They know more, they're connected more than we ever were, Gen Xers and previous to us, boomers. So they're more connected with each other and hence have access to real information at their fingertips, right? So that is one. The second thing is that they've also been trained in such a way where they can question authority more than what we used to. So that means they've been trained. Even in colleges and schools today, they've been trained with soft skills that we never had the opportunity. We had to learn all those soft skills on the job. They've been trained to do it in extra classes, critical thinking, creative thinking, interpersonal skills has been trained. So they're coming in with all these soft skills and they want to be able to use it. Now, in an organization that's still stuck in a pre-industrial and industrial era of management, we are finding that, most of these people feel suffocated. That's the first feedback. Now, when you look at performance and performance management and goal setting, imagine being suffocated with that, where they're not given the opportunity to provide inputs on what their goals should be. We clearly say in the world of OKRs, authorship is equal to commitment. If you get authorship, you get ownership. Now, when people don't get that, immediately you will start seeing people getting suffocated and they start disenfranchisement of their own organization and hence their goals. So that's the first thing. We need to be able to fix for that, that authorship of the goals also as well. The second thing is there needs to be a clear why. A clear why. You know why Google was successful? You know why, I mean, whatever we say about the guy, why Elon Musk is able to rally good talent within his organizations is because there's a very clear why. That means people know that they're coming in to join these organizations is because these organizations are challenging technology. They're challenging how humans are going to be with respect to technology, right? They're challenging them. And people with good intellect, people with the desire to contribute to a changing world want to work for organizations like that. Now, not every company, a paper manufacturing company based in some small town, probably will not be able to provide that why in terms of, oh, we are going to create more paper. But when they start creating whys around, say, sustainability, when they start creating whys around giving back to earth, when they put the messaging just like that, then we start seeing that people want to rally. And the name of the company that I'm working with is Packer. So this is a paper manufacturing company. We're working on OKRs with them right now. And it is a public company. And we're seeing that people within the organization, this is even before me coming in, are so entrenched with the why of the organization that they're just not creating paper. They're creating biodegradable, they're creating reusable material that will come back to earth. And the love for the earth is the why. So hence, that's what's needed for these people.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a good point, and Ken, even especially for the Gen Z, where purpose has become such a big, it almost sounds very esoteric or good for a conversation, but I think more and more, I mean, there are more stories, especially for that cohort where, probably someone from your and my generation were happy to kind of just go and take it as a job. And like you say, that was kind of a trickle down and we were happy to accept it. So let's focus on the OKRs a bit to say that as an alternative, right? And we want to use the next a few minutes to let's dive deeper. You talk about the five super powers of the OKRs 101, right? And so let's help us to understand what they are, right? And how do they stack up as an alternative to our traditional metrics that we've all been kind of used to.
So I have an acronym for that, an acronym for an acronym. So the acronym for OKRs and the superpowers for it is FAST, FAAST. Okay, it's with a double A. So the first one is focus. I spoke about that. Less is more. So focus is 3 to 5 OKRs, and for every O, 3 to 5 KRs. So that means you are setting your sights on making sure there are few goals that are absolutely important. This gives you the license to even say what is it that we're not going to focus on, which most businesses fail to do. Goals just get stacked up on top of each other without taking off, what's really not important. So that's the first thing. These goals do not just come off the air with people saying what they're going to do. It's informed through strategy. Hence, OKRs become a strategy communication tool. It allows you to educate everybody why we're doing what we're doing. Why is it that we're going to now go to the Middle East? Why is it that we're investing in this new technology? And hence, you create goals around those whys. So that's a very critical thing. F. The second A is alignment. Everybody's goals are interconnected with each other. It's not just top down, but there's a space for bottom up as well. So that means, so usually the O's are informed by the organization, the KRs are informed by everybody else. Okay. Or it could be that you have certain pockets or pods or squads that say, this is what we want to do as well for the business. So they volunteer OKRs bottom up. And the third piece in the alignment is the horizontal piece. So that means what we also do is we get product to speak to marketing or marketing to speak to sales, and we interconnect, and there's a co-ownership of certain set of goals. It's not just owned by departments alone and creating silos. So that's the second piece of alignment. The third piece is accountability. You have everybody being an owner for something or the other. What I prefer is that goals stop at a team level and individuals become responsible for the initiatives, the experiments that move the needle for the team level OKRs or the pod level or squad level or departmental level OKRs. So that's another thing that's there is accountability. There's an owner that's called up, and these owners need to on an ongoing basis check in and update their goals. The fourth piece is S, the stretch. We spoke about moonshots. Let me also tell you about roof shots. Not every goal can be exponentially set. So it means not every goal can be 2x. There are some goals that you need to just deliver at a 100% level because it's extremely important. So say, for example, safety in a manufacturing industry or compliance or making sure that, you are able to provide the service at the promised level, say downtime or uptime for your particular tech. Those things can also be OKRs that you want to maintain or you want to be the best at. And the last piece is the T. And the T part is the transparency. So that means it's not just checking in your goals, but there's a visible dashboard. It's like playing a game with the scoreboard on versus playing a game without a scoreboard, right? So you need the scoreboard to inform the rest of the entire organization, how every individual, how every team, how everybody, an intern should know what the CEO's OKRs are and how the CEO is performing on respect to their OKRs also as well. So the transparency. So these are the five superpowers of OKRs.
Yeah, no, lovely. I think, yeah, super. They're very, I think you make it's easy to understand and, very logical. Now, the the next kind of the $1 million question, Ken, would be, and then again in the context of Ken, this all sounds great, right? But this, as we know, the reality of large organizations, reality of organizations in general, right? We like to be in our ivory towers, right? Why do I need to look on the other side when I'm so happy in my ivory tower? So, what comes in the way, right? In a time when there are matrix organizations, in a time where there are hybrid teams, in a time where the pyramid gets smaller when you think about going up. And, all of these sort of the realities in a time where there could be a organization with stead with bureaucracy, right? All of this can just hamper what seems like a very good kind of a path ahead. And what impact would this have on Gen Z?
So let's look at this, okay? The way I'd like to look at it is there's a clear role that the organization has towards its employees, whether they're Gen Z or any of those people. That means what is the manager's role in this entire thing? OKRs are not just for the team, they're not just for the organization. OKRs are for building trust. So that's the basis of answering that question. And hence it's moving from
But do you find resistance in this process?
yes, there is. Yeah, there is resistance in setting this up. So that means what I do with organizations is I don't just introduce a framework. So with Colgate, what we did was we just not introduce that these are OKRs and leaving it there and giving them a software or Excel sheets or tracking templates to do it. It's because very easy to give them saying this is a no, this is a KR, everybody write it. Now put it on the dashboard. But it now needs to start working. And where does it start working? It starts working from training the managers and working with the managers on how to have dialogues with their people. The real merit of OKRs is based on the coaching like conversations that managers need to have with their people. That's the first thing. Because see, people are saying what their goals are going to be. People are stretching. Now you can't hold a stick, or a carrot all the time to help them motivate. You need to have conversations with them. You need to ask what's going on. You need to have real-time feedback happening. So that's where it can break. I have seen that. It can break with respect to that. Where it also possibly breaks is the fact that it also becomes a little bit overwhelming for organizations who are not geared up for something like this. I worked with family-led businesses where they hold on to information very, very dearly. Now, suddenly, when you say you're going to democratize this information in a transparent manner, they don't like it. So sometimes the very own people who call me uh, to do the OKRs for the organization, I feel that they're the biggest barrier. because they don't want to let go of decision making and information. And then that becomes counterintuitive, because then we see the employees saying we love it, uh, but we see the managers and the senior leaders not being able to provide that kind of liberty to make those decisions, or the right kind of resources and information to make that decisions as well. So, and the other piece where it also fails is when it becomes too administrative as a process. That means there's goal policing versus what needs to happen is goal coaching, right? So I come back to coaching. So policing happens. Have you checked in? Why haven't you written your OKRs? And then people start losing interest and saying, oh my God, not this administrative HR process once again, right? So it needs to turn from that into people saying, oh, I need to know what my score is. I need to know what everybody is up to. Hence, let's put in our OKRs. Let's tell everybody what our goals are, what our challenges are. It should be a space where people can claim success or claim failure also as well, and say we're not able to succeed. So that's what we need to move it to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point, a very excellent point, Ken, which is what I was to ask you, that if the resistance comes from top or even in the middle, or they feel you're infringing on, my territory, I think there's a sense of insecurity. Say that, okay, if I release this, then where is my superpower, right? That was my superpower, and um, I guess the follow up question there would be, Ken, that in our world, like in learning, we've seen when we do workshops or we do training programs, a lot of that could be very valuable in that instance. But let's say a change program or a culture change program, right? It really requires an organization to have like a sustained path, right? And whether you call it action learning, but there's more evidence that it fails than it succeeds for a variety of reasons, right? And in your experience, right, for the OKRs to succeed, right, what happens, what needs to happen sort of on an autopilot basis or post the initiation, if that makes sense, right? Because you rally the people, you've got, oh yeah, wow, this is a good inflection point in my organization. I think I'm very happy that we needed this. But a month later, people go back to old habits, or a month later, they go back to being in that busy world. In other words, how do we, like you said, we don't want the policing, but at the same time, it should be the HR, or if it's HR, they shouldn't be looked at as if, here comes the HR asking for that report again, right? So what have you seen? What works? I guess, that could be probably what, the make or break, right? The sustainability of kind of ensuring that you start at time one, but your measurement is really at time two or time three, right? Does the journey go on?
Yeah, and the first thing is, you're absolutely right. There's more news about OKRs not working in multiple organizations, and that's the report that even I get. In fact, out of the 10 implementations that I have possibly done, out of 10 possible implementations, there are five or six of them who you could reportedly certify as failed. You know, and but when I look back at it, and when I have the conversations with the CEOs and the owners, they say, Kenneth, it has never failed. It has done its job. OKRs for certain organizations like Colgate was never to do it for the long term. It was to change. Like for Colgate, the clear directive given to me was, Kenneth, we are an elephant. We are a 250-year-old organization, and we just don't know how to dance. We do not know how to be flexible. We do not know how to make good decisions. We do not know how to beat the bureaucracy that we have created. And that sitting on a high chair and saying we're the best toothpaste company in the world, and nothing's going to affect us. We challenged that through OKRs. So OKRs brought in the quick decision making, nimble mindedness. They went back and changed their existing system to make it OKRized. The OKRs did not fail. It did its job. It catalyzed. If I look at the telecom company I worked with, or the pharma company that I worked with, or even if I look at the top institution that I consulted with here in the country, Education Institute, it did not fail as much as it created the job. It gave space, a place for and a space for people to talk about what they really wish for an organization. We have implemented OKR in terms of ways with for a packaging company also as well. For Unilever is doing OKR, but they're not calling it OKRs. They're all doing it in their own way, but they're not giving it the same term. So they're bringing in stretch, they're bringing in transparency, they're bringing in every 3 months of setting up goals, they're bringing in less is more. So they're bringing in concepts, but they're retweaking what they're existingly doing because they realize that the Gen Zs or the millennials and even the new ones coming into the workspace, each one of them now wants more information. They want more purpose-led goals. They want to be not just told, they want to be included in the process of goal setting. So people want to ask the question, and they also want to ask, can I have a goal beyond my existing role? Which goal system allows for that? OKRs does, right? You can have one OKR that is more about your wish for your organization, right? People know that they're impacting an outcome versus just coming to work doing things. I mean, when you come to work and you have a to-do list, and every day you just have a to-do list, you you do not know what your impact is going to be. So hence, uh, that's another piece that I'd like to add in. I'm not sure that I
Yeah.
answered your question
No,
because I went on a tangent, but
yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, there isn't, it isn't always as black and white, but perhaps it's better to embark that journey and see that progress versus to say that, we're going to just do what we've been doing. And, it is kind of a longitudinal path. Now, when you and I spoke, you mentioned about one or two success stories, like you mentioned about the school can you share what have they done it's especially because these are fairly large organizations, right? And was it because was an additional hand from the outside always monitoring, or did they become on an autopilot eventually on their own, right? So curious to know.
the first reason for success in organizing, even Colgate, I see its success because they used it for 3 years and they were able to move from single digit growth to double digit growth. So clearly successful. The company that I invested in, Dockmode Health Technologies, which launched its IPO last year, they were successful with it. Now, the reason for the success is multimodal, but the number one reason for the success is executive sponsorship. That means people right at the top, they sustain the energy that they started off with when they do the OKRs. That means everybody at the top leadership, the core committee, the LT leadership team, whatever you call them, are very in it. So that they know for a fact that they need to call out a few amount of goals that are going to be democratized through the entire organization. And there's going to be a process, there's going to be a system, there is going to be administration that is going to happen or not, and they're going to lead it. They're going to lead that administration also as well because it's a change nonetheless. That's the first reason for success. The second reason for success is also the fact that they choose goals that will inspire, and they make sure that OKRs is not just left to where it is. They constantly inspire, they constantly communicate, they constantly tell what's important and what's not important to be done. So there's a constant communication around the goals. They don't
So
just
who does that? Is that
goes
like a project manager, which do we have in between, or is there a
good
dedicated
question.
role for that?
Good question. So what we usually do is we create something what we call as an OKR center of excellence within an organization where we train up. We can call them shepherds or champions. We create OKR champions or shepherds within the organization. Usually that is led by the C-suite, or it is probably led by the chief of staff. In some cases, even the HR head, or maybe the CTO or the CPO. Like the example that we had for the pharma company, they had a chief of staff, but it was combined with the HR head because it was supposed to be an organizational change in the way they're functioning also as well. Another company that I did was a data science company. They had the chief data science officer, okay, leading the entire OKR implementation because they wanted a few changes to be made. Another tech company that I worked with, they had the chief technology officer leading the OKR journey. So the OKR journeys can be led by where the goals are for the organization. So if it's a transformation, I would say it's good to have an HR person do it. If it is something to drive some tech or maybe launch a new product, or whether it's to increase revenue or sales, then choose those people accordingly because then they'll have more skin in the game. They know that they want to exponentially increase the success of achieving goals that are related to them. So drive them. So have shepherds, have champions. I train them up. We come in, we teach them how to coach, we teach them how to have conversations, how to then join the dots. In India we have a word called sutradhar, right? So how to be the sutradhar is something that I teach them and show them. So these people need to have good systems thinking. They need to be able to influence without authority, really, sometimes as well, and also have a little bit of administrative hand too. So that's what helps us successful. And we have had young people doing it. Like for the Indian School of Business, I had a 25-year-old guy, leading this entire piece for the organization. And he did a tremendous job, working very, very closely with the COO of the Indian School of Business.
Sure. No, excellent. So can two things. One, of course, what have you seen? Do you sense that this is more effective in smaller settings, in departments, or because if you have large organizations, where that in itself can be a fairly kind of a large exercise, in teams or departments, or have you seen that okay, maybe if it's an organization which is a mid-size or a small-size company, you just try and implement OKR more at a company level, right? What have you seen and what works?
So my recommendation is always start small wherever you are. Okay, see if this methodology works for you. So if you're a large enterprise company, I've had this one, a large credit card company, one of the global top two, I won't name them. They decided to go on a big bang rollout somewhere in 2021, right? In the midst of the COVID crisis. They said, we want everybody to have OKRs. 3 months later, everybody said, we don't want OKRs, right? So it happened because they went in a big bang rollout. They said, let's do it. Let's use this opportunity to connect. But the messaging was all wonky, in that organization. And they called me in later on. And I said, no, you can't do this anymore because people have already got disenfranchised. Rather, maybe, you can call it by another name, but don't call it OKRs anymore. Just do something else and do another, but do it small. Do it in some places that works. What I've seen is that it works very largely in organizations that are, it happens in both spaces. It works. Where does it work largely? It has worked in small organizations which are starting up, because then it becomes like a system. There's no system, there's no baggage of an existing system, right? So it's an absolutely new system for them. So the embracing of that happens very well. It happens in organizations the where the hierarchy doesn't play the role of bureaucracy.
Mm.
So that culture is very important, where people are free to share, free to talk about, and it helps in those cultures. Even if you don't have that culture, OKRs then brings in that culture, but the resistance is high. Okay, it takes time, but the resistance is high. So startups, it works really well. Scale ups, organizations that are mid-sized companies who have their goals to become a large-sized company and they want to scale up. Okay, they want to scale up without probably extra investment, without a PE or a VC, and they want to scale up on their own. Then OKRs is a great way to get everybody aligned towards the goal. So I see that working a lot with that. So the IPO company that I was speaking about, which went IPO, was a scale up company. This paper manufacturing company is a scale up company. So I'm seeing a lot of scale ups who want to get everybody included in the growth process, who believe in their people, successful. Large companies have also done it. They're still doing it. Amazon went on to adopt OKRs. They're doing a great job. Microsoft went on to adopt OKRs in multiple sections of the business. They're doing a great job. So multiple people, even if you look at Unilever, they didn't call it, but they're still in a way doing a kind of OKRs within their system. So you see more of them doing it. But having said that, even a restaurant, small mom and pop shop, or individuals, like, I have OKRs for my health, I have OKRs for my finances. You can do OKRs. It's at the end, it's a goal management system. Whether it's an organization, whether you're an individual, it works everywhere.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. Start small, make it, let the organization, let the other parts of the organization kind of see some success. Else, it could just sort of, here's the new, the old saying, like you got the, what's the new and the in thing, right? But and then it could just fail. Now let's put the spotlight here on the Gen Z, Ken, since we're talking about them, right? What would they want? So if we have to flip it to say that if I'm a manager managing this young cohort, right? What do I need to give to them to make the OKR process successful? You've obviously covered some of it, but specifically with the Gen Z and their expectations of, more frequent communication and so on. So can you highlight some of that?
I think very simple. As I said earlier, You want managers to change the messaging from let me set your goal to let's co-own your goal. So that's the first thing the manager should be looking for. The manager should be looking for more commitment from people versus compliance. Commitment is measured when people say, "Oh, I can do this. Oh, I can do this as well." When there's an added piece that a person brings in. Compliance is when a person says yes to everything you say, which is great. You would love to have yeses, but if you keep on having yeses, you'll never be able to tap into the innate potential that people have. So that's another thing, have conversations again where it is more about dialogue versus dictatorship. Yeah. So that's the first thing that I'd rather go for. Also, make sure that feedback is not just a ritual that happens at the end of because OKRs is at the end of the quarter, we do a retrospective. Let's have feedback then. No, make it a rhythm versus a ritual. So that's another thing. That means every time you're meeting people saying, "What's going on with the OKRs? I can see your targets in the red. What's going on? Oh, this is what you could do better. This is what you could change. This is for people you can speak to." Have constant conversations with people. Celebrate success as well. When something is going on, oh, this is in the green. The OKR is trending really well. Fantastic. What's going on well? What's not going on? Tell us about what more help do you need? Do we need to stretch our goals? That's another thing about OKRs. You can stretch your goals midway. You don't have to just you just don't need to settle with your existing level of success. You can challenge yourself to achieve more as well. So the job of a manager is not just to create goal systems around OKRs, but to create the belief that people will be able to do more for the organization. I think that's my that's my thing, where managers are able to ask the question to their team members ultimately, what can you do to contribute more than your JD?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it gives a sense of autonomy. Gives a sense of them becoming better at something. And as you say, it's more ownership, right? Ownership and accountability should come within because you're co-settling the goals, right? Versus being kind of put down onto you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, another question that could be uh, perhaps if you think about organizations where you have organizations which are, like you say, in a story like called it like extremely successful, been there for a long time, legacy organization, and they realize their awareness of what they've done to be successful and so on. And in a system where you have a large part of organization which is sticking to its own DNA or the old culture, and then you got this young manager, very entrepreneurial, guy who wants to try something. Do you sense that the OKRs then could actually run into trouble, right? Or do you sense that because there's sort of a subculture within a culture which is trying to kind of go against the stream, and a lot of the Gen Zs, I mean, for you to keep them engaged, right? Their experience, for most of us, their experience is coming to their manager. The brand and all of that matters, but right. So just curious. I mean, what have you seen, and what happens when you when you run into something like that?
So what happens when you walk into pockets of resistance when a person wants to do it? So I remember doing this implementation for an insurance company, and the need for the implementation did not come from the CEO, did not come from the HR person. It came from a head of a particular department who does reissuing of insurance through an online. So they have a small team of around 20-30 people compared to the organization side, which is around 3,000 odd people. They said they wanted to run it for themselves because he had heard it from some friend of his who said this is a methodology. And he started doing it. He called me in. I did a small session. That's all I did. And then he reported back saying that he's being really motivated by it and he wants to run it. So he started doing OKRs 1-2 quarters within his own team. Of course, then people around quickly started noticing that the team is achieving its goals and they come in different. This team is starting to stand out. The way they each of the team members knows what's going on. Each of the team members is able to communicate to the key stakeholders. They're able to prioritize and be very clear on what is important really. Having those conversations versus just saying yes to everything. They're able to say no to a whole lot of things that the stakeholders come and tell them because they know they have OKRs. So when they started seeing that difference happening there, people started becoming curious. They started asking, "What are you guys doing?" This, I said, "Yeah, it's OKRs," and it thoroughly started spreading. Now more people started saying we are curious, and they started adopting that. And not it is still not gone throughout the organization, but there have been 3, 4 more teams that started using the OKR methodology to help them succeed. So what helps? What helps in breaking that resistance is that, again, I'll say start small. You don't honestly you don't need permission to do OKRs. It's at the end, it's a methodology. Yeah. Right? So it's like saying uh, it's like changing your goals from I want to be rich, which is also a goal, but sounds more like a dream, okay? To saying I want to be able to save at least $2 million by the end of 10 years. And by doing that, I become absolutely financially independent. Now, when you set a goal like that, now, if you see those two, they're still goals. So it's a there's no reason for any person to say don't do OKRs because at the end it is a syntax. But of course, the syntax is more to it. The fast superpowers come in. You can have softwares that you can do it, or you can do it on good old Excel also as well. Yeah. So the resistance for smaller teams to do it, I don't see that much. Because if you want to do it, you can do it. Many people I've seen just doing it, and sometimes they don't even tell people that they're doing it. They're just doing it in their own way. They're not calling it OKRs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, good point. So Ken, just as a way to kind of conclude, just a couple of things. One, in your experience, what is the one thing that companies must do for the OKRs to succeed, and what is the one thing that they should do to avoid failure? So that's one. That's sort of the one part of the question, and the second is that okay, if I'm a manager, and I asked that question again from the point of view as you say that yeah it's yeah you could have a very entrepreneurial manager, you could do it, but sometimes you know yeah, I think in functions like sales and in a bit more tangible, but if you run into or let's say IT, you have a SLA or you have some of those kind of very hard measurable kind of ways to track it, but sometimes I remember talking to an IT, company where they are saying that for us, like, we just have to keep the systems up. So, like, how do you measure that? Like, so they say that okay, well, we try to kind of make sure that, like, okay, the downtime doesn't ever go beyond, let's say, 10 minutes. So that becomes their way of measuring. So, what is sort of the one thing that should be done? What's at the core, the pillar, and what one should be avoided? And then final sort of closing question would be to say that, okay, what can the manager do to make sure that OKR succeeds, right? And from a Gen Z's perspective.
I think I can give different answers every time to this, but currently, what is one thing that leaders should do? Before I get to that, let me address that piece about, keeping your lights kind of work. So for the IT people, at any business, there are two things. One is to run the business. Okay, so you're running the business, you're executing day-to-day tasks, and the second thing is sitting on the business and making sure that it's running well, right? So that means that's particular thing about driving the business. You're driving and you're running the business. Your existing KPIs, or key performance indicators on downtime, uptime, safety, compliance, your, say, for example, your employee attrition, it could be your, it could be even certain revenue things that you have, meeting the budget, etc., etc. We call them as business as usual goals. They will exist. In fact, one of the biggest parts of my job as a person leading my organization, I see 60 to 70% of my tasks being linked to my business as usual. They are not my OKRs. They are my responsibility. I own these goals. That's the reason I've been hired, or that's the reason I'm running my company, and I ought to do those things. They're not delegatable. I still need to run them, right? I need support from the rest of my organization to help me do that. So those will always be there. Business as usual goals need to be called out. Okay, we never lose the light and the shine on them. However, when everything becomes important, then nothing is, right? So that means OKRs is that important. You can call them, I mean, don't call them OKRs, call them very, very important KPIs. You know, just call them as it is, and have them sitting on top of your BAU, saying that, okay, I need to maintain an uptime of 99%. But as an IT person, I also have another thing. I need to improve the stability and the security of my IT system. And that's an OKR. Because I see in the long run, the number of cybersecurity technologies increasing, the number of possible attacks on our system can increase. AI probably is going crazy. So we need to create a much more robust cybersecurity system. Now, that creation cannot happen on a BAU level. That happens at an OKR level. So that's an OKR. Now you have that, which is a very long term, or maybe it's even a short term. Maybe right now, I need to, say, for example, move my servers from server X to server Y. Okay, it's not BAU. It's a very critical job for stability and probably for better storage or better speed. Um, and I did need to do that transformation. That could be a short-term OKR, which sits on top of my existing KPIs or BAU jobs that I currently have. So that's my first answer. The second question, which is about what's that one message that I would like to give. The first message that I would have in terms of what can help an organization be successful is don't over templatize your OKRs. It is not very difficult. Get people to understand the philosophy first before getting them to fill templates. Okay? Because then people will not fill templates. People will not fill templates because you told them to write 3 O's and 3 KRs per O, and asking them to come in for check-in meetings and cadence. Oh, there are multiple rituals in OKRs, by the way. So just asking them coming for rituals. Don't over-templatize that entire piece. Uh, Allow people to understand. Get them trained. Communicate. Get your leaders trained differently. Get your employees trained differently on that thing. I think that's the first reason for success I've seen on anything. What is something not to do? What is something not to do for especially the leader of the organization is don't delegate it to only HR to do this.
Mhm.
It's not HR's job. This is C-suite's job to do this. HR can become the trainer. HR can become the person who does the vendor management around it, who probably does the change management, which is even more bigger, right? Let them do all of that. But ultimately, who owns it is going to be that maybe a head of sales, maybe head of revenue, maybe a head of product, maybe head of technology, maybe head of marketing, or maybe the COO. The best role is the COO or a chief of staff, or ultimately the CEO as well of the organization. So that's something that I would clearly say.
Yeah, I really like what you said that I think let the leaders and the having champion it, right? I think it has to feel like, look, they have a skin in the game. It isn't something that they'll come talk and then you forget about it, or pass it on to the HR person, and that can happen because I think they feel like, okay, they have much more important things to do. When in fact, as you say, the ownership goes all the way, right across. So Ken, what about the Gen Z? Just as a way to close out, what is it that they can do, not do, right? Obviously, they come with a lot of energy. They're new in an organization. Should they be asking more questions? If they're part of a process, kind of contribute, what they expected, and if they don't see what they kind of thought they would, what did they voice their opinion? So, just any words of advice from their point of view.
I think the first thing is if at all your organization is using OKRs, then use OKRs as a career accelerator and not as a compliance anchor. So That means you probably can use this to add what you really want to do in order that can move your own job prospects and your own possibility to succeed. Ask why every time. Whenever you're doing something, ask why. I think that's another thing for the Gen Z people whenever they're doing goals. I mean, you might as well start using OKRs, even if your manager is not doing OKRs. You could just write down and you can go down and sit down and say, hey, what's a very important objective that we want to accomplish as a team? How do we measure it? Can I start using the system, start becoming an influencer within the organization who's and people start looking forward to saying, oh yeah, this guy is not just coming in. There's this particular term everybody's using for Gen Zs, and the word is entitled, right? I think it's if you can, and if you are a Gen Z listener listening in right now, break that and show how you can empower yourself. So I'm self-empowered versus entitled. And self-empowered can come in by saying, I know what my goals are. I want to know more about my goals. I want to be able to contribute towards my goals. I want to experiment. And I know I will fail. And if I fail, I want to come to you for help. So I think if you can have people within the organization having this kind of an attitude, then the job of the managers is also pretty relaxed. Of course, probably not the manager who wants to own, command, and control. Probably they may not like it. They may not like it. But again, you got to constantly hit your head against that wall. One day it will crack.
So
Okay.
it's also, but Ken, just on that point, the distinction to be made for them to say that, the difference between their individual goal versus a team goal. So in other words, the OKR could be like a team goal and you could still have a individual, or it could be just collectively a goal, one goal. I mean, if it's a small,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that is where, of course, you having individual goals is one thing, but having team goals, if you are a Gen Z member of a team and you have groups of people within the team, I mean, this goes for everybody as well. Go to see what can you do differently to contribute and move the needle on it. It could be a whole lot of sharing and talking about successes. Tap into your existing networks and resources, and ask what's happening in other organizations with respect to the challenge that you're faced with an OKR. It could be a tech challenge, it could be a customer challenge, it could be a user challenge. What is the challenge? Talk to your networks. You're more network probably today than even we were in our generation. Leverage that. Ask people what's going on, see what's going on. Be curious about the scoreboard, the OKR dashboards. Be curious about it. There's a space in most of the softwares today. You can comment, you can like, you can award badges to people. Use the software like your very own social media tool, but it's a social goal media tool. So use that to really leverage that and make your presence felt. It's very important to make your presence felt by giving ideas, by commenting. So do all of that as much as possible
Nice. Yeah.
in it. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And don't be worried about feedback. Don't be worried about feedback. And a lot of people also will say, oh, too much of feedback also is not a good thing.
absolutely.
Now, look at feedback as a tool for you to improve. Um, for all the young people joining the workforce today, know that you are on the journey of excellence, and excellence is never perfect. So you can never be perfect. You will make mistakes. Okay. Train yourself to excel and become better every day. But that will include that you will fail and be okay to get feedback. I've seen the reason why entitled is many of the young people have never got strict feedback saying that you can be better at this, so you can't be better at this. They've been mollycoddled. That's what the saying is. Most of the Gen Xers say Gen Zs are mollycoddled. I think we got to, if you feel that you never got good feedback, be ready to enter the workforce with some also strong feedback. So that's another thing.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful advice. I think, and I think the onus goes on the manager because if you're always getting, 8 out of 10 times you're super, and then when it comes for the appraisal, you say, "Oh, you did all this wrong." I think clearly there's a disconnect to saying that, and then you're swelling their head with all the. I think so that is a skill in itself. But, Ken, I think this has been fabulous, very valuable. I think to really help our listeners to look at goal setting in a collective process, look at the goal setting, not so much as a compliance, this is commitment. I really liked how you framed that. And just kind of bringing everyone on board and the challenge that comes with that. So start small, then go big. You do a lot of good work in this space, obviously. So, where can people find you and the work that you do in this area and the other work that you do? So, tell us a little bit about that.
So based out of Mumbai, that's where I am. That's where my team is. But we got partners spread across the world. You can always find us at atlaslearning.in. That's where our website is. Or you can reach out to me. My number is I can add that in. It's 9820160888. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very I treat LinkedIn like WhatsApp. So I'm there. I think it's good to be visible. It's good to be found, and it's good to put your thoughts out there to the world. So I'm on LinkedIn a lot.
Excellent. So there you have it, friends. We've had a very, I think, a topic where often understated, but the importance of just doing simple things and the shift in the orientation of how we look at an exercise which gets done day in and day out, time and time after. But how do we look at it so that it becomes extremely, effective for us to kind of get what we're looking for? And we've got some fantastic tips from Ken. And thank you for sharing all the resources, your coordinates as well. Really enjoyed it. I hope that all of our listeners are going to listen to this episode and talk to their managers, or if you're a manager listening to, just trying to simplify, right? I will underscore just by closing to say it's not about having more templates. It's about the collective ownership in the process and how do you raise the bar, right? So once again, thank you, Ken. It's been a fabulous conversation. I hope we can meet up in person very soon. And take care and have a good day.
See you, Nikhil. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.